I would love to call Rayman a beloved classic, but while it may be a classic, it doesn't really feel beloved, like Cars without airbags or dial-up internet. And I think that's evident in its fan base too. It doesn't have nearly the following that Sonic or Mario does, which is odd because the games themselves are basically available across like every single platform and pretty much all phones, to include weird GBA versions of the 3D games. But Rayman hasn't been the star of his own game since 2013. In fact, his side character, the Rabbids, are more popular than him, and they're getting a chance to team up with Mario. And so when I got my Mio Mini Plus, I debated going back and playing through all the Rayman games, just to see if they're worth it. And the answer is, Rayman 1, yes. Rayman 2, no. Rayman 3, kind of. I will say Rayman 1 is one of the most enjoyable games to play on the Mio Mini Plus. And it has this really weird dreamlike vibe you could really only get in the 90s. And it's best experienced under the influence of a strong drug, like Advil PM or fentanyl. And despite its druggy exterior, the actual gameplay mechanics are really creative and the type of sick thing that only a Frenchman could come up with. It's not too hard, but challenging, nice and short, and on a day where it's literally too hot to go outside, it's the perfect game. But Rayman 2, not so much. See, with Rayman 2, just like Mario and Sonic, Rayman jumped into the 3D space. And it came out on the PS1, so you can play it on most emulators and phones. At the time, the game was a classic, but it was a classic designed with joysticks in mind. So unless you're playing with a controller, this game feels clunky as hell. And if you are playing with a controller, you're probably playing on something that could run a better 3D platformer from that era, because it just doesn't handle that smoothly. Thankfully, there is a way around this in playing Rayman 2 Revolution, which is a remake for the PlayStation 2, featuring tighter controls and better graphics. But again, at that point you have a PlayStation 2, and if you have a PlayStation 2, you might as well play Rayman 3, because Rayman 3 is smooth as butter to play and quite enjoyable to play through. I think a lot of fans of the series bag on it because it has a much more comical tone. Don't get me wrong, there had always been humor in Rayman, but it was the first game of the series to go full jokester mode, and some could say enabled the rabbits to rise, and via the transitive property, minions as well. But to me, this platformer really isn't meant to be a dark or serious game, even if the story in 2 is arguably good compared to what's in 3 or 1. But the problem is, are you really going to play this game or any of these Rayman games over better 3D platformers for the time? You're really going to tell me this game is better than Jak and Daxter? It's better than Ratchet and Clank? It's better than Super Mario Sunshine? Better than Sonic Adventures? Well, maybe on that last one. And I think if you put those games above the Rayman series, you would be right too. Even the versions that stayed 2D simply don't compete with even Rayman 1 on the PS1. I mean, look how much better it looks compared to the Game Boy versions. Same thing with the DS versions and iOS versions of the 3D games. There might be some new features, but none of them are the true remastering the series kind of needs. But if you've gotten this far in the video and you still want to play these games, I don't blame you. I have a really nostalgic part of myself that loves this series because I used to play Rayman 1 all the time, and I loved even playing Rayman Arena with my friend. I mean, that game bumps. Word of warning, it's actually not that good. But I remember it being good. So I understand where you're coming from if you want to play this series. My advice is to not leave your PC. Download Rayman Redemption. It's a remake of the PS1 game with hundreds of improvements and including Xbox controller support. Then get a ROM of Rayman 2 Revolution to play on PSX on your computer and finish it off with Rayman 3. And then once you have those beat, go get a Nintendo console and play through Rayman Legends and Rayman Origins, because those are pretty fun, but they're not quite retro, so I'm not really going to talk about them. With the game standard here at Tibbs TV, I'm Jonathan Rosenblum.